The garage smelled of motor oil and regret, a cold, concrete exile where Ethan had been banished. At 17, he'd expected his twin brother, Caleb, to have his back, not to shove him out the back door with a hissed command to stay out of sight. But here he was, curled on a cot in the dim light, the weight of his family's rejection heavier than the winter chill seeping through the cracks. It hadn't always been like this. Growing up in Willow Creek, a small town in Ohio, Ethan and Caleb were inseparable, two halves of a whole, their laughter echoing through the fields as they chased fireflies or raced bikes down Maple Street. They shared secrets, dreams, and the kind of bond only twins could understand. But last summer, when Ethan came out to Caleb, whispering his truth in the quiet of their shared bedroom, something fractured. Caleb's face had hardened, his eyes narrowing as if Ethan's words were a betrayal. "You can't be that way," he'd said, voice low and sharp. "Not here. Not in this family." Their parents, devout and unyielding, made it worse. When Caleb told them, because of course he did, their mother wept, and their father quoted scripture, his voice booming like a judge's gavel. Ethan was given a choice: repent or leave. He chose the garage, a half step from being thrown out entirely, because at least it kept him close to his twin. He still loved Caleb, even if Caleb's love now came with conditions. Ethan pulled his jacket tighter, the rainbow pin on his lapel a quiet act of defiance. He'd bought it at a thrift store in Columbus during a school trip, the only place he'd ever felt free to be himself. The pin was small, barely noticeable, but to Ethan, it was a lifeline, a reminder that he wasn't wrong, just different. He traced it with his thumb, wondering if Caleb would ever look at him again without that flicker of shame. The garage door creaked open, and Ethan tensed, expecting his father's stern silhouette. Instead, it was Marcus, the new kid from school who'd moved to Willow Creek from Chicago. Marcus was all sharp edges and quiet confidence, with warm brown skin and eyes that seemed to see through people. He'd been the only one at school who didn't whisper or stare when Ethan's secret spread like wildfire. "Yo, you okay out here?" Marcus asked, his voice low, like he knew the walls had ears. He stepped inside, his sneakers scuffing the concrete, a backpack slung over one shoulder. Ethan sat up, brushing his hair from his eyes. "What are you doing here? How do you even know where I was?" Marcus shrugged, dropping his backpack with a thud. "Caleb was bragging at school about fixing you. Said you were out here thinking about your choices. Figured I'd check on you." Ethan's chest tightened. Caleb's betrayal stung worse than the cold. "He's not fixing anything," he muttered. "He's just scared. Of what people think. Of what it means for him." Marcus leaned against the workbench, his gaze steady. "Doesn't make it right. You don't deserve this, Ethan." The words hit harder than Ethan expected, cracking open something raw inside him. He wanted to argue, to say he was fine, but the truth was he wasn't. He was tired of hiding, of fighting, of loving a family that didn't love him back the same way. Marcus's presence, though, was like a spark in the dark. He didn't know when it had started, but Marcus had become someone he could trust, someone who saw him without judgment. "You don't have to stay," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is my mess." Marcus smirked, pulling a deck of cards from his backpack. "Nah, man, I'm not leaving you out here to freeze. Besides, I owe you a rematch from that poker game last week." Ethan couldn't help but smile, a small, fragile thing. They played cards on the cot, the silence between them comfortable, the kind that didn't need filling. Marcus's laughter was warm, and for the first time in weeks, Ethan felt like he could breathe. But the moment shattered when the garage door flew open again. Caleb stood there, his face pale, eyes wide with something Ethan hadn't seen before, panic. "Ethan," he said, his voice shaking. "Dad's in the hospital. He's bad. They need you. Now." Ethan's heart lurched. "What do you mean, they need me?" Caleb's jaw tightened, and for a moment, he looked like the brother Ethan remembered, the one who'd shared his secrets. "It's his blood. He needs a transfusion. You're the only match." Ethan froze, the cards slipping from his hands. The irony was cruel. His family had cast him out, but now they needed his blood to save one of their own. He glanced at Marcus, who gave him a small nod, like he knew Ethan had to go, even if it hurt. As Ethan followed Caleb toward the house, the weight of the moment pressed down on him. He wasn't just walking back into his family's world. He was walking into a storm that would test everything he believed about love, forgiveness, and what it meant to be a brother. The hospital was a sterile maze of white walls and beeping machines, the kind of place that made time feel both endless and urgent. Ethan sat in the waiting room, his hands clasped tightly, the antiseptic smell burning his nose. Caleb sat across from him, silent, his fingers twitching like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Their mother was with their father, James, in the ICU, leaving the twins alone with their thoughts. The doctor had explained it quickly. James had been in a car accident on his way home from church. A drunk driver, a slick road, and now their father was fighting for his life. His rare blood type meant Ethan was his only hope for a transfusion. The irony wasn't lost on Ethan. His father, who'd called him an abomination, now needed the very blood he'd condemned. Marcus had insisted on coming, sitting beside Ethan now, his presence a quiet anchor. "You don't owe them anything," Marcus whispered, his voice low so Caleb wouldn't hear. "You know that, right?" Ethan nodded, but his heart wasn't so sure. He hated his father's judgment, his mother's tears, Caleb's betrayal. But they were still his family. The thought of letting his father die felt like a weight he wasn't ready to carry. "I have to do it," Ethan said finally, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "Not for him. For me." Marcus squeezed his shoulder, a gesture so small but so heavy with understanding that Ethan nearly broke. He stood, following the nurse to the donation room, the needle's prick a sharp reminder of his choice. As his blood flowed into the bag, he wondered if it would change anything, if his father would see him differently, if Caleb would finally understand. When he returned to the waiting room, Caleb was pacing, his face a mix of guilt and fear. "He's stable," Caleb said, his voice rough. "Because of you." Ethan wanted to feel something. Relief, maybe, or even anger, but all he felt was empty. "Doesn't change anything, does it?" he asked, meeting Caleb's eyes. Caleb looked away, and that was answer enough. That night, Ethan didn't go back to the garage. Marcus's mom, a nurse who'd seen enough of the world to know better than to judge, offered him their guest room. Ethan hesitated, but the thought of another night on that cot was too much. He accepted, grateful for the warmth of a real bed and the sound of Marcus's soft snoring from the next room. But sleep didn't come easy. Ethan lay awake, replaying Caleb's words, his father's sermons, the way his mother's eyes had softened when she thanked him at the hospital. He wondered if this was his chance to fix things, to bridge the gap between who he was and who his family wanted him to be. Or maybe it was time to stop trying. The next morning, Marcus found him staring out the window at the dawn. "You're thinking too hard," Marcus said, handing him a mug of coffee. "Talk to me." Ethan took a sip, the warmth grounding him. "I don't know how to go back," he admitted. "To them. To the garage. To any of it." "Then don't," Marcus said simply. "You're more than their punching bag, Ethan. You're allowed to choose yourself." The words hit like a lifeline, but they also scared him. Choosing himself meant letting go of the family he'd spent his whole life loving. It meant facing a world that might not accept him either. But as he looked at Marcus, at the quiet strength in his eyes, Ethan felt a spark of something new. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of courage. Ethan woke to the sound of rain pattering against Marcus's guest room window, each drop a reminder of the storm he'd left behind at home. He'd spent the night wrestling with his thoughts, torn between the pull of family and the freedom Marcus's words had dangled before him. Choosing himself sounded simple, but it felt like betraying the only life he'd ever known. Marcus was already up, the smell of bacon and eggs drifting from the kitchen. Ethan padded downstairs, his bare feet cold against the hardwood. Marcus's mom, Angela, was at the stove, humming softly. She glanced over with a smile that felt like a hug. "Morning, Ethan. You sleep okay?" "Better than the garage," he said, managing a small grin. Angela's kindness was disarming, a stark contrast to the cold silence of his own home. He wondered what it would be like to grow up in a house like this, where love didn't come with a rulebook. Marcus slid a plate in front of him. "Eat. You've got a big day." Ethan raised an eyebrow. Big day? I was planning to hide out here and avoid the world. Nope, Marcus said, his eyes glinting with mischief. We're going to the community center. They're hosting a pride event today, small, but it's something. You need to see there's a world beyond Willow Creek's judgment. Ethan's stomach twisted. He'd heard about the pride event, a quiet gathering organized by a local LGBTQ group, but he'd never dared to go. In a town like Willow Creek, where church was king and gossip was currency, showing up felt like painting a target on his back. But Marcus's steady gaze made him want to be brave, even just for a day. Fine, Ethan said, pushing his eggs around the plate. But if I get chased out with pitchforks, it's on you. Marcus laughed, the sound easing the knot in Ethan's chest. Deal. I'll bring my running shoes. The community center was a squat brick building on the edge of town, its parking lot dotted with rainbow flags and a handful of people milling about. Ethan hesitated at the entrance, his hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, the rainbow pin hidden beneath his collar. Marcus nudged him forward. You got this. One step at a time. Inside, the air buzzed with warmth and chatter. Tables lined the walls, offering pamphlets, snacks, and glittery stickers. A drag queen in a vibrant purple wig was reading stories to kids in one corner, while a group of teens painted pride flags on a banner. Ethan's eyes caught on a couple in their 20s holding hands, their laughter unguarded. He'd never seen anything like it. Not here, not in Willow Creek. A woman with short silver hair and a kind smile approached them. Welcome, boys. I'm Linda, one of the organizers. First time here. Ethan nodded, his throat tight. Marcus answered for him. Yeah, just showing my friend there's more to life than his brother's garage. Linda's eyes softened, like she understood more than Ethan had said. You're in the right place, honey. Grab a drink, meet some folks. You're safe here. Safe. The word felt foreign, like a language Ethan was still learning. He followed Marcus to a table where a girl with blue hair and a nose ring was handing out buttons. Her name tag read, Jasmine, she/they. She grinned at Ethan. Want one? I made him myself. Ethan took a button that read, Love Wins, and pinned it next to his rainbow pin, his fingers trembling slightly. Jasmine noticed but didn't comment, just gave him a wink. Looks good on you. For the next hour, Ethan let himself exist in this new world. He talked to Jasmine about her art, listened to a trans kid named Riley share their story of coming out, and even laughed when Marcus got roped into a dance-off with a guy in a glittery cowboy hat. It was overwhelming, but it was also freeing. For the first time, Ethan felt like he wasn't hiding. But the bubble burst when he spotted Caleb's truck in the parking lot. His heart sank, the warmth of the room replaced by a familiar dread. Caleb stepped out, his face a storm cloud, and marched toward the entrance. Ethan grabbed Marcus's arm. He's here. Caleb. Marcus's jaw tightened. Stay behind me. Caleb stormed in, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Ethan. What the hell are you doing here? He demanded, his voice loud enough to draw stares. You're supposed to be at home, not parading around like this. Ethan's face burned, but he stood his ground. I'm not parading. I'm just being me. Caleb's fists clenched, and for a moment, Ethan thought he might swing. But Linda stepped between them, her voice calm but firm. This is a safe space, young man. If you've got a problem, you take it outside. Caleb glared at her, then at Ethan. Dad's awake. He wants to see you. Now. Ethan's stomach churned. He didn't know if it was a summons or a trap, but the thought of facing his father again made his legs feel like lead. Marcus put a hand on his shoulder. You don't have to go if you're not ready. But Ethan shook his head. I need to know what he wants. The hospital room smelled of bleach and fear. James lay in the bed, his face pale, tubes snaking from his arms. Ethan's mother sat beside him, her eyes red-rimmed. Caleb hovered near the door, arms crossed, like he was guarding against something. Ethan, James said, his voice weak but steady. Thank you. For the blood. Ethan nodded, unsure what to say. He waited for the lecture, the scripture, the condemnation. But instead, James's eyes softened. I don't understand you, but I don't want to lose you. The words were a knife, sharp and unexpected. Ethan wanted to believe them, but years of rejection made trust feel like a gamble. You already did, he said quietly, when you sent me to the garage. James flinched, and Ethan's mother let out a small sob. Caleb shifted, his face unreadable. The room felt too small, the air too thick. Ethan turned to leave, but James's voice stopped him. Please, stay. Ethan hesitated, torn between the boy he'd been and the man he was becoming. He glanced at Caleb, searching for the twin who'd once been his best friend. But Caleb's eyes were fixed on the floor, and Ethan realized some bridges might never be rebuilt. As he walked out, Marcus waiting in the hall, Ethan felt the weight of his choice. He wasn't sure if he was running from his family or toward himself, but for the first time, he knew he had to keep moving forward. Ethan's footsteps echoed in the hospital corridor, each one pulling him further from the room where his father lay, clinging to life and fragile apologies. Marcus walked beside him, silent but steady, his presence a tether to the world outside Willow Creek's suffocating expectations. Ethan's mind churned, his father's words, "I don't want to lose you," rang hollow against the memory of the garage door slamming shut. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy with the scent of wet asphalt. Marcus leaned against his bike, watching Ethan with those sharp, knowing eyes. "You okay?" Ethan shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping. "My dad says he doesn't want to lose me, but he's the one who pushed me away. Caleb's worse, he can't even look at me. And I'm supposed to just forgive them?" Marcus kicked at a pebble, sending it skittering across the parking lot. "You don't have to forgive anybody. Not until you're ready. Maybe not ever." Ethan wanted to argue, to cling to the idea that family was supposed to be forever, but Marcus's words felt like permission to let go. He climbed onto the back of Marcus's bike, the cold metal grounding him as they rode through Willow Creek's quiet streets. The town looked different now, its familiar houses and church steeples tinged with the weight of his choices. They stopped at a diner on the edge of town, a neon-lit haven where truckers and late-night stragglers nursed coffee and pie. Inside, Ethan slid into a booth, the vinyl creaking under him. Marcus ordered milkshakes, chocolate for himself, strawberry for Ethan, without asking, like he already knew Ethan's favorites. It was a small thing, but it made Ethan's chest ache with something he wasn't ready to name. "So," Marcus said, stirring his shake with a straw, "what's next? You going back to the garage?" Ethan stared at the pink swirl in his glass. "I can't. Not after today. But I don't know where else to go." Marcus leaned forward, his voice low but fierce. "You've got options, Ethan. Angela already said you can stay with us as long as you need. There's college, too, scholarships, programs for kids like us. You don't have to stay stuck here." "Kids like us?" Ethan echoed, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Marcus grinned. "Yeah, the ones who don't fit in Willow Creek's cookie-cutter mold." The conversation shifted to lighter things. Marcus's dream of studying engineering, Ethan's secret love for painting, but the weight of the day lingered. Ethan kept glancing at his phone, half expecting a text from Caleb or his mom. Nothing came. The next morning, Ethan woke to a knock on Marcus's guest room door. Angela poked her head in, her expression gentle but serious. "Your brother's outside. Says he needs to talk." Ethan's stomach dropped. He pulled on a hoodie and followed Angela to the porch, where Caleb stood, hands shoved in his pockets, looking like he hadn't slept. The resemblance between them was uncanny. Same dark hair, same sharp jaw, but Caleb's eyes carried a guilt Ethan didn't recognize. "I didn't know where else to find you," Caleb said, his voice rough. "Mom's a mess. Dad's asking for you again." Ethan crossed his arms, the rainbow pin glinting in the morning light. "Why? So he can tell me I'm going to hell again." Caleb flinched, his gaze dropping to the pin. "He's different now? The accident, it shook him. He's talking about you like you're his kid again, not some mistake." The word hit Ethan like a slap. "I was never a mistake, Caleb. You're the one who made me feel like one." Caleb's face crumpled, and for a moment, Ethan saw the boy who'd once shared his secrets under the stars. "I didn't mean to," Caleb whispered. "I was scared. Of what people would say, of what it meant for me. I thought if I pushed you away, it'd be easier." "Easier for who?" Ethan shot back, his voice shaking. "You sent me to the garage, Caleb. You let them treat me like I didn't belong." Caleb's eyes glistened, but he didn't look away. "I know, and I hate myself for it. I want my brother back." Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to believe Caleb, to fall back into the rhythm of their twin bond. But trust was a fragile thing, and Caleb had shattered it. "I don't know if I can do that," Ethan said. "Not yet." Caleb nodded, like he'd expected it. "Just come see Dad. Please. For me." The hospital was quieter today, the urgency of the crisis replaced by a tense calm. Ethan stood at his father's bedside, Marcus waiting in the hall. James looked smaller, his face etched with pain and something softer. Regret, maybe. Ethan's mother sat silently, her hands clasped like she was praying. "Ethan," James said, his voice hoarse. "I've been wrong. About a lot of things. I don't know how to fix it, but I want to try." Ethan's heart pounded. He wanted to scream, to demand why it took a brush with death for his father to see him as human. But he also saw the fear in James's eyes, the kind that came from staring down mortality. "I don't know if you can fix it," Ethan said honestly. "But I'm here." James reached out, his hand trembling. Ethan hesitated, then took it, the contact both foreign and familiar. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. As Ethan left the room, Caleb was waiting. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely audible. Ethan didn't respond. He walked past, joining Marcus outside, the weight of his family's words heavy on his shoulders. He didn't know if he could rebuild what had been broken, but for the first time, he felt like he had a choice. That afternoon, Ethan returned to the community center with Marcus. The Pride event was still going, and Jasmine greeted them with a grin, handing Ethan a paintbrush. "We're finishing the banner. Want it?" Ethan took the brush, dipping it in bright blue paint. As he added his strokes to the rainbow, he felt a shift inside him. This wasn't just about surviving Willow Creek anymore. It was about finding a place where he could thrive. Marcus stood beside him, their shoulders brushing, and Ethan realized he wasn't alone in this fight. The banner read, "Love is love," and as Ethan painted, he let himself believe it. Ethan's paintbrush moved in slow, deliberate strokes, the blue blending into the rainbow banner like a promise he was only beginning to understand. The community center hummed with life, laughter, music, the clink of soda cans, but Ethan's mind kept drifting back to the hospital, to his father's trembling hand and Caleb's whispered plea. He wanted to believe in their change, but trust was a seed that needed time to grow, and Ethan wasn't sure he had enough left to give. Marcus nudged him, his elbow warm against Ethan's. "You're quiet. Thinking about your dad." Ethan set the brush down, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Him. Caleb. All of it. I keep waiting for them to prove they mean it, you know? But what if they don't?" Marcus leaned against the table, his expression soft but serious. "Then you build your own family. Right here." He gestured to the room, Jasmine laughing with Riley, Linda handing out cookies, the drag queen now leading a karaoke session. "These people, they're your people if you let them be." Ethan's chest tightened, not with pain, but with possibility. He'd spent so long fighting to fit into his family's world that he hadn't considered there might be another one waiting. He glanced at Marcus, whose smile was both a challenge and an invitation, and felt a warmth he hadn't known he could feel. That evening, Ethan and Marcus biked to the lake on the edge of town, a quiet spot where the water reflected the fading sunset. They sat on the dock, their legs dangling over the edge, the silence between them comfortable but charged. Ethan's rainbow pin caught the light, and he touched it, grounding himself. "I used to come here with Caleb," Ethan said, his voice low. "We'd skip rocks, talk about stupid stuff, girls, football, what we'd do after high school. Now it's like he's a stranger." Marcus tossed a pebble into the water, watching the ripples spread. "He's still your brother. Doesn't mean you have to let him hurt you." Ethan nodded, but the words didn't ease the ache. He wanted his brother back, the Caleb who'd shared his secrets, not the one who'd banished him to the garage. He pulled his knees to his chest, the lake's calm surface a stark contrast to the storm inside him. Marcus shifted closer, their shoulders brushing. "You're not alone, Ethan. You've got me. Angela. The folks at the center. You're stronger than you think." Ethan turned, meeting Marcus's eyes. There was something there, unspoken but heavy, a pull that made Ethan's heart race. He wanted to say something, to name the feeling, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he leaned into Marcus, just enough to feel the warmth of his presence. and let the moment hold them. The next day, Ethan returned to school, his first time back since the garage. Whispers followed him down the halls, but they were quieter now, less venomous. The Pride event had spread word. Ethan wasn't invisible anymore. He spotted Caleb at his locker, their eyes meeting for a fleeting moment before Caleb looked away. At lunch, Marcus dragged Ethan to a table with Jasmine and Riley, who greeted him like an old friend. They talked about college applications, local art shows, and the upcoming Pride March in Columbus. Ethan felt like he was waking up, like the world was bigger than Willow Creek's narrow streets. But the peace didn't last. After school, Caleb was waiting by the bike rack, his expression tense. "We need to talk," he said, glancing at Marcus like he was an intruder. "Alone?" Marcus raised an eyebrow, but stepped back. "I'll be at the diner. Find me when you're done." Ethan followed Caleb to a quiet corner of the schoolyard, his heart pounding. "What is it?" Caleb shifted, his hands fidgeting. "Dad's coming home tomorrow. Mom wants you back, too. She says we're a family, and we need to figure this out together." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Figure what out? How to pretend I'm not gay? How to shove me back in the garage when it's convenient?" "No," Caleb said quickly, his voice cracking. "It's not like that. I mean, it was, but I was wrong, Ethan. I see that now. I'm trying to fix it." Ethan wanted to believe him, but the hurt ran deep. "You don't get to just say sorry and make it okay. You broke something, Caleb. You broke us." Caleb's eyes glistened, and he stepped closer, his voice barely a whisper. "I know, but I'm asking for a chance. Not for Dad or Mom, for me. I miss you." The words hit Ethan like a wave, pulling him under. He missed Caleb, too, but the pain of betrayal was still raw. "I need time," he said finally. "I can't just go back." Caleb nodded, his shoulders slumping. "I'll wait, as long as it takes." That night, Ethan stayed at Marcus's again, the guest room starting to feel like home. He lay awake, replaying Caleb's words, his father's plea, Marcus's quiet strength. He was caught between two worlds, his family's fragile redemption and the freedom he'd found with Marcus and the community center. The next morning, Ethan went to the hospital to see his father one last time before his discharge. James was sitting up, his color better, but his eyes still carried a weight. "I've been reading," he said, gesturing to a book on the bedside table, "A Guide to Understanding LGBTQ Kids. I don't get it all, but I'm trying." Ethan's throat tightened. It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was more than he'd expected. "Keep trying," he said, his voice steady. "I'll be around." As he left, he saw Caleb in the hall, holding a coffee for their mom. Their eyes met, and for the first time in months, Caleb smiled. A small, hesitant thing. Ethan didn't smile back, but he didn't look away either. At the community center that afternoon, Ethan helped hang the finished Pride banner. Marcus was there, his laughter filling the room as he teased Jasmine about her glitter obsession. Ethan watched him, the warmth in his chest growing into something undeniable. He didn't know what it meant yet, but he knew he wanted to find out. As the sun set, Ethan stood outside the center, the banner fluttering above him. He wasn't ready to go home, but he was ready to keep moving forward, one step at a time. Ethan stood under the community center's rainbow banner, the evening breeze tugging at his jacket. The "Love is Love" message glowed in the streetlights, a beacon in Willow Creek's quiet darkness. He felt caught between worlds, his family's tentative olive branch and the vibrant, accepting space he'd found here. But for the first time, he was starting to believe he could choose his own path. Marcus joined him outside, his hands stuffed in his pockets. "You look like you're carrying the world, man. Want to talk?" Ethan exhaled, his breath visible in the cool air. "It's Caleb, my dad. They're trying, I think. But it's hard to trust it. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop." Marcus nodded, his eyes on the banner. "You don't have to decide anything right now. You've got time to figure out what you want." Ethan glanced at him, the weight of Marcus's words settling like a warm blanket. He wanted to say something, to name the spark that flared every time Marcus was near, but he wasn't ready. Not yet. Instead, he bumped Marcus's shoulder with his own, a silent thank you. The next week passed in a blur of school, hospital visits, and late nights at the community center. Ethan's father was home now, recovering slowly, and the house felt different, quieter, less oppressive. His mother stopped quoting scripture, and Caleb started leaving small gestures. A soda left on the porch, a note saying, "I'm sorry," tucked under Ethan's backpack. They were small, but they chipped away at the wall between them. At school, Ethan noticed a shift. The whispers had faded, replaced by curious glances or even shy smiles from kids who'd been at the Pride event. Jasmine and Riley started sitting with him and Marcus at lunch, their table a small island of acceptance in the cafeteria's sea of cliques. Ethan felt himself unfolding, like a flower after a long winter. But the tension with Caleb lingered. They hadn't spoken properly since their confrontation at the schoolyard, and Ethan wasn't sure how to bridge the gap. He missed his twin, but the hurt ran deep, a wound that hadn't fully healed. One afternoon, Ethan found Caleb waiting by the bike rack again, his expression nervous but determined. "Can we walk?" Caleb asked. "Just us." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. They headed toward the lake, the same path they'd taken as kids. The silence between them was heavy, but Caleb broke it first. "I've been reading, too," he said, pulling a worn pamphlet from his pocket. "A guide to supporting LGBTQ family members. I got it from Linda at the community center." Ethan stopped walking, his heart stuttering. "You went there?" Caleb nodded, his cheeks flushing. "I didn't know what else to do. I messed up, Ethan. I didn't understand, and I let Dad's words get in my head. I thought if I pushed you away, it'd protect me somehow. But it just made everything worse." Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the pain, but Caleb's voice cracked with a sincerity he hadn't heard in months. "Why now?" Ethan asked. "Why care now?" "Because I almost lost Dad," Caleb said, his eyes glistening. "And I realized I could lose you, too. Not just to the garage, but for good. I don't want that." Ethan looked out at the lake, its surface rippling in the wind. "I don't know how to trust you again," he admitted. "But I miss you, too." Caleb's shoulders sagged, like he'd been holding his breath. "I'll earn it back. I promise." They stood there, the lake stretching before them, and Ethan felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. That evening, Ethan went to the community center for a movie night. Marcus had saved him a seat, his grin lighting up the dim room. They watched a rom-com about two guys falling in love, and Ethan found himself stealing glances at Marcus, his heart racing every time their eyes met. When Marcus's hand brushed his during the popcorn fight that erupted after the credits, Ethan didn't pull away. Afterward, they lingered outside, the night air cool against their skin. "You like the movie?" Marcus asked, his voice teasing. "It was okay," Ethan said, smirking. "The popcorn fight was better." Marcus laughed, then grew serious. "You're different tonight. Lighter." Ethan shrugged, but he knew Marcus was right. Talking to Caleb had loosened something inside him, like a knot finally starting to unravel. "I'm trying to figure out who I am," he said. "Not just the kid in the garage, or the kid who saved his dad. Just me." Marcus's eyes softened, and he stepped closer, close enough that Ethan could feel the warmth of his breath. "Whoever you are, I like him." Ethan's heart pounded, and before he could overthink it, he leaned in, their lips meeting in a soft, tentative kiss. It was brief, but it felt like a spark igniting, a promise of something more. When they pulled back, Marcus's smile was brighter than the stars above. The next day, Ethan went home for the first time since the garage. His mother greeted him with a hesitant hug, her eyes brimming with tears. "We're trying, Ethan," she said. "It's not perfect, but we're trying." His father was in the living room, a blanket over his lap. He looked up, his face softer than Ethan remembered. "I'm proud of you," James said, the words awkward but genuine. "Not just for the blood, for being you." Ethan nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He didn't know if he could fully forgive, but he was willing to try. Caleb lingered in the doorway, watching, and when their eyes met, Ethan saw something new. Hope, maybe, or the ghost of their old bond. As he left, Ethan felt lighter, like he was carrying less of the past. He biked to Marcus's house, the wind in his hair, the rainbow pin shining on his jacket. He wasn't sure what came next, but he knew he wasn't alone. Ethan pedaled through Willow Creek, the evening air cool against his skin, the memory of Marcus's kiss still warm in his chest. The rainbow pin on his jacket caught the streetlights, a small rebellion that felt bigger with every passing day. He was starting to see himself not as the boy banished to the garage, but as someone who could build a life on his own terms. At Marcus's house, Angela greeted him with a warm smile and a plate of cookies. "You're looking better, Ethan," she said, her nurse's eyes catching every detail. "Like you're carrying a little less weight." Ethan grinned, taking a cookie. "Trying to. Thanks for letting me crash here." "You're family now," she said simply, and the words settled into Ethan like a promise. Marcus appeared, his hair still damp from a shower, and tugged Ethan toward the backyard. They sat on the grass, the stars bright above, and talked about everything and nothing. College plans, favorite bands, the Pride March in Columbus they were both itching to attend. When Marcus's hand found Ethan's, their fingers intertwining, Ethan didn't pull away. It felt right, like a piece of himself clicking into place. "You're smiling more," Marcus said, his voice soft. "I like it." Ethan's cheeks warmed. "You're not so bad yourself." They laughed, the sound mingling with the crickets, and Ethan let himself lean into the moment. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. The next morning, Ethan biked to school with Marcus, the two of them weaving through Willow Creek's quiet streets. At school, things were different now. The Pride event had shifted something in the air, fewer whispers, more nods of acknowledgement. Jasmine and Riley waved them over at lunch, their table a growing hub of misfits and dreamers. Ethan felt like he was part of something bigger, a community that saw him for who he was. But Caleb was still a shadow in his life. They hadn't spoken since their talk by the lake, and Ethan could feel the distance between them, even when they passed in the halls. He wanted to reach out, but the hurt lingered, a reminder of the garage's cold concrete. After school, Ethan found Caleb at the community center, of all places. He was helping Linda set up chairs for a support group, his movements hesitant, like he wasn't sure he belonged. When he saw Ethan, he froze, then offered a small wave. "What are you doing here?" Ethan asked, his tone cautious but curious. Caleb shrugged, setting down a chair. "Trying to understand. Linda said I could sit in, listen. I want to get it right this time." Ethan's heart twisted. He wanted to believe Caleb, but trust was a fragile thing. "You don't have to do this for me," he said. "Do it because you mean it." "I do," Caleb said, his voice steady. "I'm not perfect, Ethan, but I'm trying. For you. For us." Ethan nodded, the weight of Caleb's words settling into him. He didn't know if they could ever be what they were, but he was starting to see a path forward, one where they could be brothers again, even if it looked different. That evening, Ethan went home for dinner, his first real meal with his family since the garage. His mother had cooked his favorite, lasagna, and the table was set with an awkward kind of care. James sat at the head, his recovery evident in the color in his cheeks. Caleb was there, too, quieter than usual, his eyes flickering to Ethan like he was waiting for something. The meal was tense, but not hostile. His mother asked about school, his father about the community center. Ethan answered carefully, testing the waters. When James mentioned the book he'd been reading, Ethan saw a flicker of the man he'd once idolized, the one who'd taught him to ride a bike and throw a baseball. "I don't have all the answers," James said, his voice rough with emotion. "But I want to learn. For you." Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to believe it, but he'd been burned before. "I appreciate that," he said finally. "But it's going to take time." James nodded, and Caleb reached out, squeezing Ethan's shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a bridge, fragile but real. Later, Ethan met Marcus at the lake, their spot now. They sat on the dock, the water lapping softly below. Marcus was quieter tonight, his eyes searching Ethan's face. "How was dinner?" "Weird," Ethan admitted. "But good, I think. They're trying. I don't know if it's enough, but it's something." Marcus nodded, his hand finding Ethan's again. "You're doing the hard part, you know? Figuring out how to love them without losing yourself." Ethan looked at him, the moonlight catching Marcus's eyes, and felt that spark again. "You make it easier," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus smiled, leaning in, and they kissed again, this time slower, deeper. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a promise, a step towards something Ethan was ready to explore. As they pulled back, Ethan felt a clarity he hadn't known before. He was still navigating his family, his town, his own heart, but he wasn't alone. Marcus was there, the community center was there, and maybe, just maybe, his family was starting to find their way back to him. The next day, Ethan joined Caleb at the community center's support group. They sat side by side, listening to stories of struggle and triumph. When it was Ethan's turn to share, he hesitated, then spoke, his voice steady. "I'm learning who I am," he said, "and I'm learning who I want to let in." Caleb's hand brushed his, a silent apology, and Ethan didn't pull away. Ethan stood at the edge of the community center's parking lot, the Pride banner fluttering above him, its colors vivid against the gray Ohio sky. The past weeks had been a whirlwind: his father's recovery, Caleb's tentative steps toward understanding, and Marcus's unwavering presence. Ethan was no longer the boy in the garage, but he was still figuring out who he was becoming. Inside, the center was buzzing with preparations for the Columbus Pride March. Ethan had agreed to go, his first time at a real Pride event, and the thought both thrilled and terrified him. Marcus was at his side, painting signs with Jasmine and Riley, his laughter a steady rhythm in Ethan's chaotic world. Ethan dipped his brush in red paint, adding bold letters to a sign that read "BU." It felt like a message to himself as much as to anyone else. Caleb had started coming to the center more often, sitting in on support groups, asking questions, listening. He was quieter now, less sure of himself, but Ethan could see the effort. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Last night, Caleb had pulled him aside at home, his voice low. "I'm proud of you," he'd said, the words awkward but heavy with meaning. Ethan hadn't known how to respond, so he'd just nodded, but the moment had stayed with him. The morning of the Pride March, Ethan woke early, nerves buzzing. Marcus was already up, packing water and snacks, his excitement infectious. "You ready for this?" he asked, tossing Ethan a rainbow wristband. Ethan slipped it on, his heart racing. "As ready as I'll ever be." They drove to Columbus with Jasmine and Riley, the car filled with music and laughter. When they arrived, the city was alive with color, rainbow flags, glitter, people of every age and background celebrating who they were. Ethan felt like he'd stepped into a world where he didn't have to hide. Marcus took his hand as they joined the march, their fingers laced together. Ethan's chest swelled, the weight of the past falling away with every step. He saw couples kissing, families cheering, strangers hugging, and for the first time, he felt like he belonged. Halfway through the march, Ethan spotted a familiar figure in the crowd, Caleb. He was standing on the sidewalk, holding a small sign that read, "I'm learning." Their eyes met, and Caleb's smile was hesitant but genuine. Ethan froze, then broke away from Marcus, weaving through the crowd to his brother. "You came," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. Caleb nodded, his eyes glistening. "I wanted to see you here. To see you happy." Ethan's throat tightened. He didn't know what to say, so he hugged Caleb, fierce and quick, like they were kids again. Caleb hugged back, and for a moment, the world was just them, two brothers finding their way back. That evening, back in Willow Creek, Ethan sat with his family for dinner. It was still awkward, but the silences were softer now, filled with possibility. His father talked about the community center, asking questions about the march. His mother smiled when Ethan mentioned Marcus, a small but real shift. Caleb was quieter, but his presence felt steadier, like he was finally starting to understand. After dinner, Ethan and Marcus biked to the lake, their spot now a ritual. They sat on the dock, the water reflecting the stars. Marcus's hand found Ethan's, and they sat in silence, the kind that didn't need words. "I'm proud of you," Marcus said finally, his voice soft. "You're building something real, Ethan. A life that's yours." Ethan looked at him, the moonlight catching Marcus's eyes, and felt that spark again, brighter now. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said, and he meant it. Marcus had been his anchor, his courage, his hope. They kissed, slow and certain, the world fading around them. When they pulled back, Ethan smiled, his heart full. "I think I'm ready," he said. to be me. Months later, Ethan stood at the community center, helping organize a Winter Pride event. Caleb was there, setting up chairs, his presence no longer a surprise. Their parents had started attending family support groups, their questions clumsy but earnest. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Ethan had applied to colleges, his portfolio filled with paintings that told his story. Willow Creek's fields, the garage's shadows, the rainbow banner's light. Marcus was applying, too, and they talked about moving to Columbus together, building a life where they could be themselves. As Ethan hung a new banner, Marcus came up behind him, wrapping an arm around his waist. "Looks good," he said, his breath warm against Ethan's ear. Ethan turned, kissing him softly. "Yeah," he said, "it really does." He looked out at the center, at Caleb laughing with Linda, at Jasmine and Riley planning their next art project. This was his family now, not just the one he was born into, but the one he'd chosen. The garage was a memory, a scar that had healed into something stronger. Ethan wasn't running anymore. He was home.